The time is now 5:30, and we will call to order the Board of Trustees regular meeting for the month of December. The time is 5:30 again. So please stand and we'll observe a moment of silence and then our pledge. Thank you. Okay, at this time, I want to welcome Elena Ladd to the podium. Okay, and the board is going to move down to the front aisle so that we can observe the student performance, and so we'll come back right after this. Thank you.
Thank you, Board President Murray. I am going to let the kids do the talking tonight and welcome them up onto this stage. We're so excited to have some student performers from Bowie with us tonight to share some holiday music selections with us. So let's give them a round of applause as they get assembled here. Thank you all so much. Let's give them one more round of applause.
Wow, that was great. Thank you guys for being here. And audience, as you know, that's the reason why we do what we do. And all those little shiny faces, so it's great to see those guys here tonight. The next item on the agenda is public forum. And we have 4 speakers, I believe, tonight. And the first one is Reagan Hinojosa. And his topic is Legacy Freshmen. Welcome, Reagan.
Good evening. Good evening, members of the board and Dr. Ramsey and Mr. Pounds. Last month, we heard from parents and teachers and members of the community about their concerns at Legacy Freshmen, and I just want to give the board, but mostly the community, an update on what has happened since then. Associate Superintendent Garcia and the campus principal, Ms. Warren, led a meeting with a room full of community stakeholders. They included the executive directors of Kaleidoscope Ministries, Rope Youth, a parent, PTA, Partners in Education Liaison, lead pastor of Community Worship Center, the MISD police chief, the campus police officer, the Department of Guidance and Counseling for MISD, the AP for Legacy Freshmen, Ms. Torres, principal at Legacy High, and Trustee Booker. Mr. Garcia has informed the group mentioned above that they are working with Ms. Warren to develop a calendar of support. This will include all the support that was discussed, such as incentives, motivational speakers, mentorships, and implementation of the Character Strong program. At the moment, the immediate support can always be a helping hand with visibility at the campus. Also, the Be the Change mentoring program will be on campus in the spring semester to help students develop a healthy way of thinking and making positive choices. The district has had staff from the service center helping with monitoring the halls as well. I also wanted to address the physical building of Legacy Freshmen. As a member of the Long-Term Facility Planning Committee, it's become apparent that whenever the board decides to put a bond together, which is down the road, nobody's talking about that, this campus needs to be addressed. This campus has doors that open to the outside with no interior hallways. The students that decide to leave class without permission leave the teachers with no choice but to only report this to the office because they cannot leave a room full of students unattended. Also, there's no way for a teacher to know who is on the other side of the door because the doors have no windows. And this is because if anybody were to trespass after hours or vandalize a campus, they could easily break a window to enter the classrooms that open to the outside or neighborhood streets. This building is not an ideal environment for learning. And I would also greatly encourage anyone willing to volunteer to reach out to Ms. Warren or Mr. Garcia so these students can see that we as a community care about what's going on in their campus. And I want to reiterate something that Ms. Shannon Torres from Legacy High said in the meeting. Many of these students have not been in a classroom in almost 2 years, and they've forgotten how to do school. And it's a reality that I think we need to be mindful as we try to get back to the normal day-to-day life of pre-COVID learning. Thanks.
Thank you, Reagan. Our next speaker we'll welcome to this podium is Heidi Kirk, and her topic will be Thank You and Bereavement. Welcome, Heidi.
Thank you. Good evening, Superintendent Ramsey, Board, Council. The first thing I wanted to do is actually say thank you for many of the things that Reagan mentioned. I do want to say some specific names, but I'm confident I will, even though I wrote them down, I'll leave some out. But first, I'd like to thank Mr. Murray, Mr. Bishop, Mr. Trischetti, Mr. Booker for listening and speaking with me personally about my concerns and the things that were happening. I'd like to thank the superintendent and her staff for all the actions that they've taken. I know we have a new AP, hopefully, in the works that should be starting sometime next semester. We've had regular officers on campus. to help with some of the issues. We have 2 teachers for special populations that have been added due to the increased, we have 120 more students than we've ever had, so we have those couple of positions as well. And I know there's a lot of other things in the work. We've also had a lot of district staff that have been on campus, not all of whom I know their name, but Ms. Valenzuela, Mr. Garcia, who have also talked with me personally, and I appreciate them. And Mr. Hightower, Mr. Van Hooser, Ms. Jimenez, Ms. Ramos, Ms. Payne, Mr. Horner, and so many others, again, that I do not know all of their names. There's been a lot of presence, and we're grateful for that at the campus. And to Reagan for getting involved as a community member. I think we have a few other community members that are getting involved as well. I'd also like to thank Karina Barrera, separate from this, but for listening to me speak about some of my frustrations with my own pay and some of the things that have happened in the district. I've appreciated her listening ear and her telling me that even though I really did a lot of venting, she was listening for potential feedback that could help. And then I would also like to thank Dr. Davila for the intercession committee and having the opportunity to participate in that and speak about some of the things that went wrong and how we could improve any intercession next semester or possibly in the future. So the other item, and I'll speak quickly, is my father passed away on November 27th. I'm thankful we have a calendar where I was able to spend a week with him in the hospital before he passed. But I did discover we do not have bereavement pay that is specific. We do have our 10 days that we get, 5 local, 5 state, but they're not specifically for bereavement. We had 3 people in November just at my campus who lost. 2 people lost their mother. I lost my father, and one of those people also lost an in-law, father-in-law. That's a lot of death, and for us to be worried about taking time off, I had to choose whether to take 2 days unpaid or not because we don't have any specific bereavement. This is not for me, but this is for the other people who will come after me, and for people like my friend who lost her husband last Thanksgiving, buried him Wednesday, and had to come back on Monday because she didn't have time off. So I would respectfully ask the district and the board to consider adding some type of bereavement pay or some type of pool of days that could be used by teachers for illness or, catastrophic type things, deaths that happen in our district. It's a common thing in a lot of government agencies and large companies, and I would appreciate you all considering that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kirk. The next speaker is Chernika Goodley, and Ms. Goodley will speak on Washington.
Thank you. Good evening, Superintendent Dr. Ramsey and the board. I'm just here to provide a bit of history for the record as I was unable to attend last week's meeting. As you stated, my name is Chernika Goodley. I'm an elementary school teacher at Bonham. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to speak about the heritage of the community of Midland, more specifically, the south side of our community. I am the granddaughter of Eldridge Leonard Jordan Sr. He was one of, if not the first, African-American educators that arrived in Midland, Texas in December of 1939. His sole purpose was to establish a school for minorities in which to educate the children and their parents, as well as curriculum development for the school. My grandfather became the very first African-American principal appointed by the Midland Independent School Board, under the leadership of Superintendent W.W. Lackey. The building he would oversee had just 3 rooms, and it was named the Colored School. Along with him were 2 African-American teachers. The Colored School was the only school where minority children and their parents learned how to read and write. Due to my grandfather's efforts and leadership, the 3-room school was named George Washington Carver, our very own Carver. With great perseverance and partnership with the school district, Booker T. Washington School was built. My grandfather became its very first principal, which just brings me to the question, why should the name be changed to YMLA? There's nothing wrong with using the school facility for other educational purposes, but I was just thinking, why disrupt the integrity of the community to change the name? I'm here on behalf of my mother, who's with me, my family, and the community residents to preserve the history, significance of the name of the very first elementary school to serve minorities, educate my mother, her siblings, the children and their families of the Southside community, spearheaded by my grandfather. What a great historical legacy that our schools hold in Midland, which should be preserved for the continuing education of all students and their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Goodley, and I want to say thank you, too, for being a teacher. I remembered you from the community meeting Mr. Bishop had at Bonham, and you were there, and I really appreciate all you do at Bonham, so thank you.
Thank you.
The last speaker we have tonight is Matt Galindo, and Mr. Galindo would like to speak on Washington Elementary. Welcome, Mr. Galindo.
Good evening, Mr. Murray, Board Superintendent Ramsey. Just wanted to come up here just to continue the conversation. I think, even though you're not deciding on it tonight, still putting it off, that the conversation still needs to continue about what we're going to do with Washington and YWLA. First, I just wanted to say how extremely proud I was of the community of East and South Midland that came together. And I know some of those conversations were pretty hard to have. Some of those conversations were very uncomfortable. But they were necessary conversations that needed to be had and still need to be had. And I would encourage y'all to continue those conversations with folks. The one thing that I can't stop thinking about is how, in this situation, we are asking students to leave to better serve other students. And if you just heard the lady that just spoke of what that school means to that community, to our community, what that school means and what it means to have that school in there, what it means to be able to send our children to a neighborhood school. And I know folks that argue and say, well, it's not a neighborhood, it's a neighborhood school. It is. It was, and it's still considered a neighborhood school, just like the other schools of choice that are in our neighborhood that not all children can attend. It depends on whether they're selected or not. But that's what we're still having to deal with, is whether or not our kids going to be allowed to go to that school or not. And I know that you heard it over and over and over again at those meetings, but if we're going to be completely honest, was that second meeting really going to happen had the folks not shown up to the first meeting? I know it wasn't, but that's what we're talking about. Are y'all willing to have those conversations, those tough conversations about what it means to us, what it means to be able to send our babies to these schools, what it means to have that place just right down the street, that we can just walk them to that school? And if we tried to get them in, could we get them in? There was a lot of passion in there, and the only thing that I would say, the only thing I was really disappointed in that meeting, there were district leaders that afterwards asked folks to apologize because of their comments. Apologize for being passionate. Apologize for sticking up for their community. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? Isn't that what was asked of us, is for the community to start getting involved? And then when the community got involved, we're asking folks to apologize for the words that they said, because it meant something, because they took time out of their day to go up to y'all and to have a conversation. And we're asking for them to say, I'm sorry for what I felt and how I feel and what I think needs to happen in our community. So just wanted to pass that along and ask that YWLA not be moved to Washington. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Galindo. The time is now 5:51, and we will move to agenda item 4, consent agenda. Item A is board meeting minutes. Item B are monthly financials. Item C are personnel appointments. Board, are there any reason why any of these items should be pulled from consent? Hearing none, the consent agenda is deemed approved. Agenda item 5 is district presentations, and A, proposed boundaries for 2022-2023 school year. We will welcome Ms. Spencer to the podium for this presentation.
Good evening, President Murray, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Ramsey. Proposed boundaries for the 22-23 school year. In September of this year, the board heard a demographic study from Davis Demographics regarding forecasted projections through school year 2029-2030. And we've heard since that time ongoing discussions about the possibility or the need to redraw elementary attendance boundaries in the near future. This slide demonstrates forecasted growth for Yarborough Elementary. You see that the resident students, meaning students that live within that boundary, is forecasted to increase approximately 200 students in grades PK through 6 through school year 2029-30, resulting in forecasted enrollment increases each year. With a current enrollment of 837 students, Yarborough's facility is currently above capacity with 4 portable spaces on site to provide adequate classroom space. When we go back and look at that initial slide, we see forecasts and the visible growth in this area because of new homes that we not only are forecasting to be built in the future, but we see being built right now. It brings to light the need to consider a new boundary for those who will be zoned to attend Yarborough Elementary. This slide here represents that proposed revision. The green area currently is what is zoned for Yarborough Elementary School. The yellow areas point to the area outlined in red that is proposed to become part of the attendance boundary for Henderson Elementary. When we look at the demographic data for Henderson Elementary, we see that its resident student population is also expected to forecasted to increase slightly each year, resulting, you see on the bottom slide, an approximate enrollment of 488 students by school year 29-30. But when we look at their current capacity of students with an enrollment of 365, they are currently at 51% capacity with a building that has a capacity for approximately 700 students. On this slide here, you see that this proposed change to the boundary will decrease Yarborough's building capacity from 112% to 98% and increase Henderson's building capacity from 51% to 65%, which represents a reduction of 14 percentage points and an increase of 13 percentage points. Next steps following this meeting will be additional communication with impacted families. There is an additional meeting scheduled for families at Yarborough Elementary on January 6th. This will be on the board agenda for January 18th to consider this proposed revision. Families following that decision will be notified. They will also be contacted by Henderson Elementary, who is ready, willing, and able to welcome them as part of their school community, and will begin inviting them to events that will be held in the spring so they can become familiar with that campus. Families who are impacted by this transfer, and it is approximately within that zone, 121 students, 24 of which are current fifth grade students. Families may apply for a transfer back to Yarborough, should they choose. If they are a current fifth grade student or will be a sixth grade student in the 22-23 school year, they and their siblings will be granted a transfer for 1 year, should they wish to return back. Questions?
Mr. Gischetti.
The current enrollment of 365, does that include the child care that is currently?
It does not include the child care, no.
What is that? Do we know kind of what that occupancy is and what that looks like over the?
I do not know exactly. I know that there are 5 classrooms that are currently occupied within, but there is someone in the room who might know that answer specifically. So, Ms. Messick, if you would like to.
Yes, let me pull up those exact numbers for you.
Okay. Okay, we will. We'll follow up.
Board, do we have any other questions? Mr. Marquez?
Yeah, so speaking holistically, it'll be another topic, obviously, of conversation. Like, I think the last time we were in district, we had a whole bunch of conversation about it. We'll have some more conversation about it again. But holistically, how do we resolve the problem of Midland? You know, how are we going to resolve the problem? I'm just looking for a holistic answer. I'm not looking for something specific to dive down into 26,000 students. Holistically, how are we going to resolve the problem? Because the reason I'm asking this is, you know, the community will ask, you know what I mean? You know, I'll have the same conversation again as to what are you doing, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And how come you don't have that $300 million to resolve the problem? But holistically, what is it going to take?
So as we saw from the demographic data, and we've talked about ongoing now, and in the last two meetings that the board has been together, we are seeing the greatest growth in North and West Midland. We do know that there are other campuses throughout the district that are reaching or exceeding that functional capacity when we're looking at the interior space of our buildings only. Portable buildings have been brought on site to address some of that. We are currently in the middle of long-range planning, long-range facility planning specifically, that will help us identify over a 10-year time frame what additional facilities or facility needs exist. So whether that could be additional buildings, add-ons or additions to buildings, renovations of buildings, et cetera, to help us address some of our growth. In addition to that, there are some internal things that we also have to take a look at. We know that some of our campuses may be at capacity because of our current transfer policy, and there may be more transfers within the building that are occupying space that resident students may need to occupy. So there's some things that we need to look at internally as well before we evaluate the need to draw additional boundaries, but it is possible that at the end of long-range planning, we will be looking at doing this again.
So, actually, I just thought about this question in a sense, but because I've looked at other cities that have grown so fast, you know, and, you know, so we did a demographic study, right? And I think you made a comment the other day that at the rate we're going, we need to do one every 6 months in a sense, just to calculate the right answer in a sense. Because, you know, when you have when everything's changing so fast, there was so much work done for the last bond on the committee side, on the facility side, to figure out a solution. You know, most likely our next bond, you know, as we tackle this massive problem, you know, it's going to look different just because, you know, the situation has changed so much since then. And I know that some of the proven numbers that we're talking about have come to fruition. So the last study we had, we had the possibility, the high, the medium, and I think percentage-wise it's worked out as far as the growth. But, it's important to have this conversation in a sense holistically because we as Midland ISD, in my opinion, our public needs to know that we're going to need a bond to fix some major problems in Midland ISD. It's not adequate anymore to just do a patch job per se, you know what I mean? And it's for our public, it's inherent that we give you the information, but at the end of the day, it's the voter, it's our voters that
Right.
that they're going to have to approve it, to what they want in the school district, and there's 1,200 school districts, and I can assure you that there's 1,200 board meetings, and there's always going to be something not right, you know what I mean? Years ago when we had the meeting, when it was booming, and we were just talking about the sewer infrastructure, and somebody had a conversation about it, I remember that they said, hey, listen, you'll get to the point that you that system itself won't be able to contain, the population of Midland. So the infrastructure problem is big for us. And it's not only for us, as I say us as Midland ISD, it extends to all government agencies that are in this area.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I say that because our public needs to know that as an entity, a governance entity, that we're, the problem is big, and it's going to need support from the public to get us there together to move forward, because, the redistricting, yeah, we might, we redistrict and put all those kids next year, that area is going to continue to grow. You know what I mean? I know for a fact that area we're talking about, it's growing every day, and it's not going to stop. When you have the cheapest land available, potentially, and I don't think it's cheap anymore, but when it was cheap, people are going to move into them, because that's what they can afford. And, that land is being bought up quicker than land that's been developed for $300,000 homes or $400,000, whatever the case may be. But, and I say that because my dad moved me there in 1980, and we cleared the land by hand to move a trailer in there without water or electricity. And I drive down some of these roads and I see people literally doing the same thing in the daytime. So it's not going to stop. The population is going to continue to grow. A year from now, we'll be back to talking about we can't fit all the kids in Henderson. But we as a school district, or I should say I as a board of trustees, all I can do is receive the information and try to make the best choice possible. But I can't predict how many more people are going to show up next year, and for a school that's going to need to grow potentially more.
I think that's a valid point. And as you mentioned, we are going to update the information more frequently. So when the board is asked to make decisions about things like this, it is based on the most current data that we have.
And I appreciate all the work that the district's done and yourself has done to get us to this point. And I know there's a lot of work that goes into this. And so I really appreciate that, all the work that's being done to look at every situation for the best possible outcome.
Thank you.
Quickly, I just want to say I appreciate the fact that you guys are taking this piece by piece while the Long-Range Planning Committee continues to do their work, and we can wait until they've taken everything into consideration to really do a whole apple cart turnover, possibly. I understand the need here is immediate. So it's my understanding that you guys are or have already met with the families affected. Is that, have y'all already met with them, or are you?
We've had communication with the families affected.
Okay.
We did hold a meeting, but it was not very well attended.
Okay.
And so we will be holding another meeting on January 6th.
How are families being notified by the district that they are?
Communication is coming through our communications department, but directly from the campus, and so they've been notified via email and through call-outs.
Okay, and then you said that it was 121 kids, but do you know how many families directly are impacted by that?
I do not off the top of my head, but I can get you that information.
Okay. And then of the people that you have met with, what has the feedback been, if you can say generally?
Generally, the feedback has been positive about Henderson Elementary, but they also love Yarborough Elementary, and so I think that we can anticipate many transfer requests back to Yarborough. The priority will be given to fifth graders and their siblings, and then we'll see what seats remain available.
Which I also appreciate you guys considering the fifth grade that's coming into sixth, because those kids have started their career there and
Right.
would like to finish elementary school there. So I think that's very reasonable. How many more meetings are you said there's one more planned?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then assuming that that is not well attended, what are the next steps? I'm not saying it won't be, but do we have a plan for reaching all of those families and having a personal discussion?
So we will continue to reach out to them and hope that we have more attendance at the January meeting. I do know in speaking with Principal Arthur that she did receive some comments back specifically, or regrets, may be a better word, about not being able to attend the meeting. But they recognize the purpose and they recognize what is happening. Ms. McCall mentioned before tonight's meeting as well that her department, Student Services, has received a call. People are recognizing what is happening and just asking for more information.
Okay, great. And in some ways, hopefully parents may understand that as we decrease capacity at one school, your child's going to get will they get a better teacher-parent ratio? I mean, not parent, teacher-student ratio, or since that's mandated by the state, that's not necessarily the effect? Right?
It really depends on the staffing at the campus. Currently, based on staffing, yes, the student-teacher ratios are smaller at Henderson. I cannot say that will be true moving forward as that campus continues to grow itself.
Okay, That's what I needed. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, board?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spencer. The next item on the agenda is item 6, district reports, and these are report only. A, superintendent update, B, innovation update, and C, staffing update. Board, do we have any questions from those 3 reports that we need to ask of tonight? Hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item 7. The time is 6:09, and we will move to item A, academic update. 1, GPM 2.1 and 3.1 presentation report, and that will be by Dr. Martinez and Mrs. Martinez. Made it easy tonight. Welcome, ladies.
Okay. Good evening. Yes, we are both here, Martinez and Martinez. Good evening, Board President Murray, board members, and Superintendent Ramsey. This evening, we are here to present to you information around Goal Progress Measures 2.1 and 3.1. These are centered around the performance of our 3rd through 8th grade students, specifically in the area of math and reading. And I do want to emphasize, as we have in the past before, that our goals are written at the meets or master's level performance. But before we get into those specific goal progress measures, we did want to share some information very quickly. We did share some of this information with you on over the weekend during a board work session. So I'm not going to dive too deeply into this, but we felt that it was important to include this in our presentation. The Texas Education Agency has been conducting an analysis of how our students performed using last year's STAR data. And the purpose of that is to gauge and begin to understand the impacts that COVID has had on student learning. So the report that was released, again, was using preliminary data, was centered around information with reading and with math. Before I show the following slides, I want to emphasize that our goals are written for 3rd through 8th grade performance, and the information that I'm going to share with you is not MISD data, it is state data, and it is all grade levels. And so here, this slide is pretty self-explanatory, but these are the overall conclusions that came out of the analysis. So we know that STAR definitely had an impact in academic performance, but what the state was able to see, and the nation as well, is that there has been a larger decline in the area of math than in reading. The negative impact of COVID, according to the agency, has erased years of improvement in both reading and math. We know that our economically disadvantaged students experienced a much greater loss than in both reading and math as compared to students who were not economically disadvantaged. And They also found that remote learning appeared to contribute to learning loss despite household incomes. Again, this here is state data, not MISD data, for all grade levels. And basically what this slide is showing is how the state performed in both of these areas. So you can see here that that there was a regression in performance, but again, a much larger one across the state of Texas and the nation, really. But this particular slide shows Texas data in the area of math. Math took a 15% impact as compared to 2019. Before I share the information on this slide, I want to emphasize that this is not what we are reporting on today. We're reporting on 3.1 and 2.1, which is not STAR data. The reason that we wanted to show this data was because we were going to show the information that the Texas Education Agency had shared. We actually already reported, and I'll put this up there in the title, we already reported on STAR data in July. This is up here to show you, based on the information that we just shared, where MISD was and where the state was in terms of that that information that was just shared using last year's STAR performance. So this is reflective of last year's data for 3rd through 8th grade. MISD is in the blue, and you can see that in 2020-21, MISD in the area of reading performed at 35%, again, at the meets and master's level performance. The state performed at 39%. The orange, those are the targets that the board has set for our annual outcome goals, which we'll be reporting on again next school year. One thing to point out here is you can see that despite COVID, Midland ISD maintained in the area of reading pre-COVID and post-COVID with a 36% in 2018 and 2019. This information here is the same, and again, we have already reported on this in July, but we wanted to show again, this is math, and as I mentioned earlier, when I was explaining the findings from the agency, math had taken the greater impact across the state. You can see here that MISD went from a 39% in 18-19 on STAR to 32% this past school year. The state is the green marker that you see there with a 34%. So MISD was 2% away from the state this past year in accordance to STAR 3rd through 8th grade. MISD did have a 7% regression in the area of math. This is indicative and it aligns to what we're seeing trending across the state and the nation, where districts are taking a greater impact in the area of math. Okay, so now I am going to move on to what we are reporting on tonight in accordance to our Lone Star Governance reporting calendar. We are reporting on Goal Progress Measures 2.1. This particular one aligns to the performance of 3rd through 8th grade students, again at the meets or master's level performance in reading, based on an assessment, a standards-based assessment, and the goal for 2023 is 48%. I did bold here at the end that for 2022, the board has set a target of 46% at the meets or master's level performance. So we shared this with you in a previous presentation that we are using the Nwea Map Assessment. It is a national assessment that is used across the nation, and this assessment is being given 3 times during the school year. So our students took the assessment at the beginning of the year in September, For middle of year data, our students are currently, or we are currently in the middle of that window, and that will close on January 14th. So we are expecting to have data for STAR projections, but also data for growth, where we're going to be able to really assess and analyze the impact of all of the interventions and supports that have been provided for not just students, teachers across the district. As you can see here, for this particular area, reading, our students were projected, because what this assessment does is it has been linked to provide a projection to STAR. So at the beginning of the year, it was telling us that 35% of students were projected to hit the MEETS level performance. As I showed you STAR from last year, we ended at 35%. So those two numbers matched. And there wasn't a big difference here. Now, the way that MAP is designed, it is a growth assessment. And so students are expected to grow. I believe the national average for regular growth is to increase, and this assessment uses what's called a RIT score, 11%, but that is just expected growth. We have been implementing accelerated plans to accelerate growth. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the data tells us once we complete the assessment window in January. And so at middle of year, we'll take a look at that and see what that looks like. It'll give us a better understanding of how close we are to that target of 46% that you have set for this. Any questions on this slide? Okay, so the second goal progress measure that we're reporting on is essentially the same, but it's around the area of math. Again, at the MEETS or master's level performance. For August 2023, we're aiming at a 51% at the MEETS or masters, but for this school year, you have set a target for end of year 48% in this particular area. Again, just as I explained in the previous slide, we gave that beginning of year assessment in September. We're in the middle of the window to complete that middle of year assessment. And at the beginning of the year, when we looked at the linking study, which is what it's called, to link it to a projected performance, it is telling us at the beginning of the year that 29% of students were projected to hit the MEETS or master's level performance. Earlier, I showed you the data from STAR last year, and so our students were at 32% at the end of last year. So that is a 3% difference from end of year last year to beginning of year. And again, we are focused on accelerating student instruction and interventions that we're providing for our students. So we do expect that number to go up. We will have a better indication after the January 14th deadline. At the end of the year, you have an expectation that we hit the target of 48% at the MEETS or master's level performance. Any questions on this information?
If I understand what you said about goal progress measure 2.1, I thought you said something to the effect that MAP's expected growth from beginning of year to the end of year, or perhaps the middle of year, was 11%.
So the information that we've received from NWEA MAP is that on average, when they look at students from across the nation, they see an 11% increase in their RIT score. And so we do utilize the RIT score performance level. So essentially, a student should grow 11% based on their RIT score. However, that doesn't include the accelerated. That is just at the MEETS growth.
That's my question. If I understood the 11% growth figure for the prior goal progress measure, does MAP have a call it an accelerated anticipate or an average accelerated growth percentage that they expect?
I believe that would be 14%, but I will confirm that number.
so I understand, do you believe that we are on track to hit these measures, the targets that we've set?
I believe that we are implementing a lot of the right strategies and the right work to close the gap. I think when we receive our middle of year data, we are going to have a much better idea and be able to answer that question much more effectively.
I just have a parent question. My girls are in the middle of taking the middle of year assessment right now. They've been coming home saying, I got meets, I got masters, whatever it is. Do they get the immediate result in the room after they finish the test?
The program is designed to immediately provide those results.
Okay, and then remind me again, I know we were sent a link of where the information was from the beginning of year, but is that in Skyward, or how do parents access the map data themselves if they want to go back and review it?
So we do have information linked on our webpage under the assessment page on how to do that.
So it's not part of Skyward, right?
I don't, Dr. Martinez, where are you? Jeff?
Sorry, I'm only asking because I'm struggling with this in my own home, and so I know there are other parents that are probably asking the same.
And I know that our team members provided training to principals on where to access that. We have various platforms where we can access that information. So I'm going to let Mr. Horner answer that in terms of how principals were directed to relay that information to families.
Just remind me. I'm sure I've been told.
It is a specific platform, and so it is not through Skyward.
I didn't see it there.
Now, I can't say that I've, as a parent, done that, so I'm going to confirm that and make sure. If it's wrong, I'll make sure to correct that. But it is, from my recollection, it's a completely different login.
Will you, if you don't mind, after the meeting, just shoot me? I'd like to put it out to the public exactly how they can.
Absolutely, I will do that for sure.
If they've forgotten, like myself.
Perfect. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And one thing, we'll send you that information, but one thing I do want to point out is on our MISD webpage, we do have a specific area where we post information regarding assessments. And on that webpage, we have a video and we have directions for parents on how to access that information. Thank you. And I'll hand it over. Oh, yes, go ahead.
During the function of testing, and y'all can collaborate on it, but is it possible to put some type of one of the pages in the front when you open the web page? At this time we're going through testing, and here's some useful links, because just as an idea, just as more of a communication type deal. As you're going through the year, put the hot topic item right in front of that. And you probably do in a sense, but
it might be better to do that campus by campus, because different grade levels, because there are windows. Because if not, we would be saying it's a testing window. What we can do is use the weekly Friday message out and share, this is the window, please check with your child's school and webpage for specific information.
Okay,
that way we're able to do it, but we don't confuse parents, freak them out when it may not be their child's testing day.
And we have this
I appreciate the clarity, because see, there we go again. We as a trustee, you function in asking the question, but when you're talking to somebody who does the boots on the ground type deal, they're like, hey, we don't want to confuse all 26,000. Let's do it by campus. And it's obviously more logical, notification there. But okay, that's all I have.
Thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Marquez. I do want to also emphasize that we are in the middle of this middle of year assessment window, and this is a new assessment for to utilize here at MISD. So we do have a plan to work with our principals and to make sure that we have consistency across every campus with regard to how we're going to share this information with parents, when that's going to happen, and we're going to make sure to include information on how parents can easily access this information, and how they can get questions answered as well.
Good evening, Board President, members of the Board, Superintendent Ramsey. I'm here to talk to you about our next steps in support of goals 2.1 and 3.1. So as you can see in the information in front of you, we are providing intense and targeted support through professional development and leadership coaching, specifically to support the areas of literacy and math. Our PLCs, which are the professional learning communities where teachers, principals, and other staff members gather to look at data, determine instructional practices, how to teach, specific standards, what are the best practices, etc. For that, we are providing ongoing PD, very targeted collaboration, ensuring that collaboration amongst principals and teachers is strengthened. We are using rubrics. We are conducting calibration visits to ensure that there's alignment and there's a systemic approach from what is discussed, what's actually happening in the classroom, and how do we go back full circle to continue that alignment. Along with the targeted PD and coaching, we're also providing differentiated support through data analysis. We know that every campus, every teacher, every principal has different needs, right? And is in a different place. So we're very intentional about using multiple data points to ensure that we are very targeted in the support that we're providing, whether it's coaching, additional professional development, increasing our presence in the campuses has also proven to be a highly effective strategy that we have started through the reorganization of the LLI division. At the end of the day, we know that the magic happens when that tier 1 instruction is based on best practices. And so we are continuing to focus on ensuring that differentiation and scaffolding and data analysis is heavily utilized at the inception so that then teachers can catch up or determine what are the next steps for the kids that are not making the mark, that are staying behind. And so all of this is being provided through a very conscientious and very systemic approach to ensuring that we are able to meet those 2.1 and 3.1 goals. We also created the literacy strategies position this year, which is in direct support of pre-K through second grade, although they support other areas as well. And so we also have, as you have heard in the past, us presenting on Fontes and Pinnell as a literacy framework. We also have the Imagine Math and Imagine Literacy that are very specifically helping support the data that we're collecting, for example, from either the STAR test or the MAP test that we administer at the beginning of the school year. And we're looking forward to those middle of the year results so that we can compare where we are and determine next steps. What questions do you have for us?
Dr. Ramsey, I have a question that relates to this. So I know we have to wait for the kids to finish this semester, but when are we using this information along with the STAR data that we used for the first intercession to pull kids, and when will families be notified?
For intercession, as a part of the parent advisory in the fall, the parents were very clear with us that they needed to be notified at the latest 4 weeks before intercession. So that's what we'll do. So yes, grades, loss of credit for the high school students, STAR data, even kind of more informal teacher seeing needs for students. They're gathering all of that right now, and parents will be notified a month before intercession.
I think John whispered attendance. I think.
Because mine had to attend last.
No, but I think that attendance is that being used as well. I mean, obviously credit recovery, but I don't think that that's wrong to be approaching kids who are not well attending school as well.
I'm going to actually defer to the team. Our principals and teachers referring students that may have low attendance, or is it, I mean, in
only
my
based on
experience, they
grades?
go hand in hand. If you're not attending, you're not doing well. But I would like to see if the team can address
That's
it.
not a necessarily approach that we're taking, is what you're saying.
I think specific to your question, so attendance is looked at, but second intercession, we're very specifically looking less at STAR and more at data that you're pointing out. We are looking at attendance. It's not primarily used at elementary, but it is going to be reviewed. It's considered. It will be primarily used at secondary, especially for credits. But we're looking at the beginning of the year compared to the middle of the year map. We're looking at all other data points, CFAs. So STAR this time for February is much more on the back burner because we have all of this cumulative data that we've taken up through that first week in January.
So will the year end, what will the timing look like along with STAR? How does that assessment work with STAR?
Can you repeat the question?
So is it before or after we take, I assume it's before the STAR test, we take the end of year, or is it after?
Oh, the dates, do you have the dates for the
How does that line
NWA
up?
map end of year?
So it's not exactly at the end, but it MAP, because it's normed nationally, prescribes the exact number of weeks of instruction. And I believe it's 30 weeks of instruction is when we give the end of year. So
With the timing of STAR?
so the end of year is, so 30 weeks is right there within that same window. It's not exactly, and it kind of depends. There's, elementary and secondary with different grades, but it's within the same month roughly of when STAR is given.
So we won't necessarily have that year-end data in order before STAR?
The EOI will not necessarily even be considered or looked at for STAR. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's what I was saying.
Typically in former districts, we use that if we don't get the STAR data back for summer school. And then once we receive the STAR data, we look to see how it aligned.
Okay, I was just trying to understand how we utilize
great
that test versus
And in addition to that, the ability of us collecting that end of the year map assessment along with the STAR data will give teachers tremendous amount of data to begin at the beginning of the year, right? To begin with very strong data, not just the STAR data, but they also have a nationally normed reference assessment that can inform their practices and interventions from the inception.
And I'm sorry, I have one more parent question, but fortunately for me, thus far the girls have been doing pretty well on these assessments, so we haven't needed to have somebody call us. But if your child were behind and you were sent the link and you don't open it, is somebody following up with those parents to say, we've looked at your data, your teacher has seen it, we see that there are some gaps happening here. I just want to make sure that it's not just a simple push out to the public and that we're pushing back in, making sure that our parents understand your child is starting to look like they're not right where we'd like to see them,
So that's a very good question, and that's part of the systems that we're working on refining in each of the schools. Reason being, one of the things that I like the most about the MAP assessment combined with all the other multiple data points that we're using is that students have been coached and facilitated into creating growth goals. So we're not just solely depending on this MAP major exams, if you will, STAR, et cetera, but kids are tracking their own progress along the way. And in an ideal world, we are hoping and ensuring that Principals are developing systems in which teachers continuously communicate with parents of those kids that are not doing very well. And so that appropriate interventions, tutoring, supports, differentiated instruction, scaffolding at levels 2 and 3 could be implemented early on and not wait till the end of the school year to, oh, what happened? We are building those systems. We're not where we need to be, but we're definitely working very hard with the principals to put those systems in place and to ensure there's tracking documents or protocols where they can follow up with that. I don't know if you wanted to add something else.
Not specifically that question, but just to answer the first question completely. So our window for the end of year is April 25th to May 18th, and most of the STAR testing is around May 10th. So it's within that same window, and so likely the students will take STAR and then follow up with finishing the end of year exam for MAP. So,
Board, do we have any other questions?
So, and, sometimes I have to ask a question just for our public in a sense, but which kid, which part of our population has been excluded from receiving this type of intervention or help? Zero?
I'm not following your question, sir.
We're purposely not taking any kid in the school district, pushing them off to the side and not teaching them?
So I think the answer is every child is
Right.
receiving the benefit of receiving formative assessment and NWA and a teacher who has gone through professional development and a principal who has gone through professional development, because part one is meeting students where they're at, but part two is actually doing something about it. And at various times, even within a school year, I may be an excellent student but struggle with certain concepts. This process, and that's the whole purpose of making sure that we have systems in place. We should be able to very easily identify the child who's struggling with maybe 2 to 3 standards, and then provide interventions within the school day, possibly outside of the school day, so everyone is included. That doesn't necessarily mean that every child this academic year will have needed the assistance, but yes or no one is excluded.
Okay, well, I know it's an obvious question, but sometimes I get asked, I've been asked that question, and especially as a Hispanic leader, when the majority of Hispanic leader, that we're not attending to a certain part of the population, which I knew that's not a fact, but I wanted y'all to testify in the sense of that we are attending to all children in the ISD. So I really appreciate that. I remember when we went to look for students on that Saturday and drove all over Midland. I remember looking at the list, and I don't remember Xing out anybody for any reason. We went to every single spot we could try to find somebody and see why they're not at school, why they're not attending. And so I really appreciated the district for doing that. I'm glad I was able to be involved. Once again, you go to some situations and they're heart-wrenching in a sense, because you see the potential living situation somebody might be in, but those are the realities of life.
Right.
And we've said before that that's not an excuse for not teaching the child. So every child in Midland ISD that comes, no matter what condition this child's coming to, we're trying to educate him with all the resources that we have.
Well, and I will hope, and I will certainly encourage any parent or any member of the community who feels that that's happening to ensure that they communicate with the principals, right? If they feel that by any reason their child is being excluded from any of the support systems that we have, we certainly want to know and correct that immediately.
And I appreciate that, because communication is key in our community, and it being stated should give people more confidence that if there's something that they feel that it's not correct. Yeah, the first level should be the teacher and communication, you know, and then the principal, obviously.
Yes, sir.
So, thank you for all the work that y'all do.
Thank you.
And I don't know if we're going into the next portion of it, but I just wanted to say real quick before we get, is that I just want to wish MISD a Merry Christmas. And, you know, compared to last year, in a situation that the world, the community has been in, I just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and thank you for all the work you do and for showing up and educating, because it's been the salvation. We found out that our educators have been the salvation to society, because there's a lot of testimony out there about how difficult it was being enclosed and not being able to go to school. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez, Mrs. Martinez, and Mr. Horner for presenting tonight. Board, do I hear a motion to approve the academic update for GPM 2.1 and 3.1? I have a motion by Mr. Marquez. Second by Mr. Bishop. Any discussion? All in favor, please show by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item 7B, Midland Central Appraisal District Board of Directors Ballot Resolution, and this is a housekeeping item, and so I don't necessarily think we need Mr. Dodds to present. So,
Mr. Chairman, I motion to approve the resolution of the Midland Central Appraisal District official ballot.
we have a motion by Mr. Trischetti, a second? Second by Mr. Bishop. Any discussion on this? Okay, all in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Thank you, it's unanimous. The time is now 6:44, and the board will move into closed session in accordance with Government Code Section 551.071 for the purpose of private consultation with the board's attorney on any and all subject matters authorized by law, and Section 551.074 for the purpose of considering the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee, or to hear complaints or charges against a public officer or employee. We do not expect action coming out of closed session, and as Mr. Marquez said, we do want to say Merry Christmas to all of our staff and Happy New Year to you guys, and we appreciate all you do, and to the community of Midland as well. We hope you have very good holidays. Thank you. All right, the time is now 7:49, and the board is emerging from closed session. We have no action, and so we are also adjourned at 7:49. Thank you.